Welcome back, everybody, as we start a new series today, designed for players that are new to the game, or at least maybe haven't played the game in a while. A lot of the orbital, tutorial videos that I've found are pre 1.0, or it's definitely not 1.2. Not a lot of 1.2 orbital videos. But we're going to kind of start with the basics. The number one thing you need on your ship, if you've been playing, is some type of capsule. In this case, we're going to put one of our Kerbals into orbit. So we will do the manned capsule, and we'll start with this MK1 capsule. The best thing about this is, it seats one person, so it is light. It does have some reaction wheel, which means it does have the ability to turn without any other assistance on it, which is a little bit different from the lander can. You do save a little bit of weight, but the reaction wheel is, I believe, it's quite a bit weaker. So we're going to start with that. And one thing to keep in mind when you're building your ship is that you are essentially going to start from the top, is what is going to essentially come back to Kerbin with you. In this case, these two items, as well as our parachute, is going to be the only thing that comes back to Kerbin with us. So that's what we're going to return to the surface. And now the rest of it is going to be getting it to orbit and doing what we want it to do. The basic craft that I usually use to show people how to get into orbit is just going to be this one. And the further you build down on your ship, those are going to be the things that launch first. Your staging down here, the bigger the number gets, the highest number is going to be the thing that stages first. So we're going to add a couple decouplers on here, along with some large tanks. The Terrier engine, which was the first one we added, does not operate very well. I should say thrust weight ratio wise in the atmosphere, which means it doesn't have enough power. I believe, because if we just launch this, it weighs about 4 tons, and let's see, it has so the max it could lift would be 1.4 tons. So this right here would not even lift off the runway, or lift off the launch pad. So we have to add some more, but we want some fuel to get us up into orbit. So without explaining anything else, I mean, this is going to be the best way. This will get us to orbit right here. We have 14.5 tons. This has a thrust of, 168-ish at sea level, which is what the ASL means as opposed to vacuum, which means it does operate more efficiently and gets more thrust when you're actually in a vacuum. But it can lift about 168 tons 16.8 tons. And essentially, when you're determining that, you can go down here to see the mass of your ship. You're multiplying that by the force of gravity, which is 9.8, but you can round that up to 10. So it's going to be a little bit shy of that. So we need the engine to have at least 145.9, kilonewtons of thrust, and this one has 160, essentially 168, which is good. The other option you do have is this one. This one, it does have a bit more thrust. It does have I believe it has about the same, a little bit better ISP, which is essentially your fuel efficiency. You'll see over there on the right side, about in the middle there, the engine ISP at sea level is 250 for this one. This one is 265. In that case, the higher the better. We might actually stick that one on there. Downside, this one does not have as powerful gimbaling, but that's okay. What we're going to do to affect our gimbaling is we're going to put some wings on it. Generally, I just like to stick 2 on there, like so. And then if you want to, you can put these 2. I never put 4 steering wings on, but we have 2 steering wings, which are these ones. And then we have these 2 that don't steer. And you can tell by that, if you right-click on this one, you can affect those different maneuver types, which we won't go into now, but you can just leave all those on. So, and these ones, when you right-click, they don't really do anything. So right now we have, 205 kilonewtons of thrust at takeoff, and we will need about 146. And generally, you want to have at least 1.25 times the amount of thrust as weight. 1.25 thrust to weight ratio is a pretty good ratio for getting off of the pad and getting into orbit. So this should reach orbit no problem, assuming we don't kind of tip it over and get out of control. So we'll launch our craft here. And as we load up on the launch pad here, the number one thing you want to check is your staging, which a simple craft like this that you built kind of top to bottom should not have any problems with staging, but you want the first engine to be on the bottom, followed by the decoupler, followed by the engine, followed by the second decoupler, followed by the parachute. And as you notice, if you mouse over them over here, they will highlight on the ship, and vice versa. If you move your mouse over on the pad on the ship, it will highlight them on the staging menu. So it looks like we are good. Jebediah Kerman is set. Next few things you want to do here is you do want to turn on your SAS, which is your steering, which activates basically the computer keeps your ship in a stable position. Next thing you want to do, your thrust meter over here. I'm sure if you've played before, you can go Z for max, X for cutoff, or you can do shift, hold shift for a sliding thrust or sliding throttle, as well as hold control for a decreasing throttle. But off the pad, we want to get full thrust until we reach about 100 meters per second here on surface speed, which at that point we will then tend to turn over. And if you're not familiar with how orbital insertion works, basically you can't just shoot straight up. It's about getting really high and then going sideways very fast. So we want to go straight up until we start getting out of the the thicker atmosphere down here at the lower levels, and you can read that by the atmosphere gauge here. As these, you can watch these kind of slowly slide up. I believe this is around, I think it's around like 8, and then up here is around like 20, I think, and then up here is like 50 or something like that. But we'll see that as we ascend here. So we'll hit the space bar, and we'll begin to lift off the launch pad. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that our engine does not have very much steering at all. The main thing we're going to be using to steer is the capsule on top, as well as the winglets on the side. And in this case, you want to make sure that your ones that are steering are facing the way you're going to want to turn. You always want to turn west when you're going into orbit until you get a little more advanced. It is easier to get into orbit if you turn westward as opposed to north, south, or east. East being the hardest because you're fighting the rotation of the Earth. So we're about 100. So we will then begin to tip over just slightly. Probably go over to like 15 degrees. And as you'll see, without me hitting the buttons, if I just hit it once to push it over, kind of press and hold, the computer will adjust. And that's what your SAS is. It's determining, it's kind of straightening your ship out and things like that, which is good for if your ship would try to get out of control. The SAS will try to recover it. So we want to get to about 15 by the time we get to 5,000 meters. The goal is at 15,000 meters up, we want to be at that 45-degree angle. And we want that to be a gradual process. So we are going a little bit faster. Once you turn over the 15 degrees, you can throttle down to say 2/3 thrust, which is fine. And now as we're ascending, we want to be down to that 60 mark by the time we reach 10,000 meters. And as of right now, we are going a little bit steep here, which is fine. You want to be down to that 45-degree mark by the time we reached 15,000 meters. And with these winglets, while it does fight you and try to pull back, it does keep your ship overall more stable, which is good. Stability is always a good thing when entering orbit. So we're tipping, 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 and we're at 15,000 meters, 17,000 meters actually, and we are not quite to 45 degrees. The indicator here determines which direction your ship is facing, and then the other one, which we call the prograde marker, will determine which way your ship is essentially going. So right now we are going about that 45-degree mark there, which is good. So as we're going here, we want to look at what press M for map, and then you'll want to see where your apoapses, which is essentially where your ship is kind of going to get to peak altitude. Now, once you're to about 30,000 meters, you can pitch way down and go almost horizontal. And we are struggling to get there because, number one, at this high of an altitude, the atmosphere is very thin, so our winglets do not have very much influence over our direction. But we are out of fuel in that stage, so we will hit the space bar to decouple that and activate our final stage. And this one, while the engine does have a little bit of gimbling, the main thing, because the ship is so small that's affecting your direction, is actually your capsule. So right now, we are kind of approaching, you want to get the atmosphere ends at 70,000 meters. And being at 70, we have to be above 70,000 meters to be considered out of the atmosphere. So we want to just burn, burn, burn. Now the difference between this Terrier engine, while it has less thrust, it is a lot more fuel efficient. I think it's about 1.5 times the fuel efficiency of the previous engine that we used. And the further you extend this arc, the easier it is for you to get into orbit, because we want this to get, normally shoot for around 100,000 meters to get is a good stable orbit to where you do have some maneuverability without dipping back into the atmosphere. So when you dip back into the atmosphere, it slows your ship down, and when you slow your ship down, you fall back to Kerbin. So we don't want that. And by burning sideways, we want to keep burning sideways until we get our apoapse, which is our highest point, up to the 100,000 meter mark. At which point we will then cut the engines and wait until we get to 100,000 meters to burn again. That will actually put us into orbit. So we're just going, and the higher you get, the faster that it starts moving. And we are almost there, 90, and we are at 100. So, as you can see, look how long you can almost see both sides. Right there and right there, you can see our, and we just have to get that. And how do you push the opposite side of your orbit, and it's affected when you burn, you're affecting the opposite side of your orbit. So when we're burning here, we're affecting over here, and we want to push the other side of the orbit out of the surface. So we're going to burn once we get to that apoapse. So we can fast forward here, and we will just spin over to the prograde marker, and orbital velocity is about 2,250 meters per second, which is not too far away from where we are at currently. And you'll notice the periapse appears as your lowest point, and as soon as they flip, you are in orbit. So that's 119 by 100, and we could just sit in this orbit all day, and it would have no problem staying at this altitude for the duration that you're playing this game. But then one thing we do want to get back to Kerbin, we don't want to leave our Kerbinauts stranded in orbit. So whenever you want to return to orbit, you're going to do the opposite of what we did on the way up here. Now you're going to burn prograde, or I'm sorry, retrograde, which is the same marker, just with an X in the middle. There's retrograde, and then prograde is on the other side with no X in it. So we will spin around, hit the prograde marker, and like I said, it's going to affect the opposite side of your orbit. So as soon as you start to burn, it's going to start dipping this periapse to a lower altitude. So we will kind of just slide it up to a third of thrust, and it starts to dip down. And if you left it right here, you would fall back to Earth eventually. But I'm actually going to take it all the way back down to the surface, which is a harsher re-entry. But when you're coming down from orbit of Kerbin, coming down straight to the surface from orbit is not an issue. So I'll wait till it gets right about down to the surface, and then we will cut it off. And now, while you can still see it, it's going to be basically, that part is going to be where we're going to land. That's where we would land if there was no atmospheric drag. But once we enter the atmosphere, it's going to slow our ship down, and it's going to pull that line just closer, 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 closer. So I'm just going to fast forward. Actually, before we enter, we don't want our engine to be the first thing that enters. We want our heat shield. So we're going to jettison that last stage. And like I said, this will be the part that actually returns to Kerbin. You can kind of just click on this retrograde marker if you're in sandbox mode. or your pilots are sufficiently leveled, which I believe is only level 1 to do that. You can hit retrograde, and that will keep your ship pointed in the retrograde. So that's going to keep it to where your heat shield is the first thing that hits. Now we'll fast forward, and it will automatically slow down your time acceleration as long as it's only at 50. As soon as you re-enter the atmosphere, which is right there, and it automatically turns our ship back retrograde. And now we can watch. We can kind of watch this, as this right here is going to be pulled ever so slowly to the I guess you consider that east, which is odd. I'm not sure. Well, it's going to be pulled that way. And as we zoom back into our ship, you'll probably start to see the heat of reentry start to appear. And there you kind of see it. And the faster you're going, the higher up that's going to appear. But at the orbital velocities, that is about where it's going to appear, around 50,000 meters or so. And then the idea is, the water landings are definitely the easiest. You can be going a bit faster if you land on water, but landing on land is not an issue as long as you're going below, say, probably 8 meters per second or so. Which with just one capsule and one parachute should not be a problem, but this landing looks like it will be in the ocean, which is going to be good. And I'm not, we're not thrusting at all. It's just the atmosphere is just slowing us down. So we are coming in for a landing here, and it's getting more and more burning up, but we shouldn't have any problem running out of heat shield. The heat shield is burning off, which is what this number is right here. But that's all but stopped, and then the atmospheric drag goes away. Your parachute turns gray. You can then spacebar to hit the parachute. And in current build, you can actually leave this on time acceleration to execute your landing, because in old builds you used to not be able to do that because it could either kind of pull your ship apart or it would crash the game or things like that. But in this current build, it's a lot more stable. And as long as you have a small amount of parts on your part that's landing, you can't leave it at full times acceleration. Now, when it reaches below 1,000 meters, the parachute will fully deploy, right like that, just in time to keep us from smashing into the ocean. So now coming down at about 6 meters per second, so that would be about 30 seconds, but at time acceleration it's going to be quite a bit faster than that. And we are landed. That was kind of a basic orbital tutorial, and next time we will probably be going over things such as the maneuver nodes on your nav ball. We'll go on how to adjust your orbits to match other orbits. We'll go over rendezvous and a few episodes down the line, and then maybe how to land on the moon, how to land on Midness, and how to transfer to other planets. If you do have any requests for tutorials that you would like to see in 1.2 that have not been updated by other tutorials, and I would love to kind of dive into that. But until next time, thanks for watching.